First, the headlines. France's War Veterans Minister Jean-Marc Todeschini paid a historical visit to Algeria today to mark for the first time the 70th commemoration anniversary of the 1945 hideous massacres of Stif, Guelma and Kherrata in eastern Algeria. Algeria is hoping to revive a flagging economy with a new $262 billion dollar investment program over 5 years to develop and diversify the national economy. And finally, foreign nationals in South Africa are seeking protection as xenophobic attacks hit at least 9 provinces of the country. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Dzair News and welcome to this English news edition. First, in our top stories, France's Veterans Minister Jean-Marc Todeschini paid a historical visit to Algeria today to mark for the first time the 70th commemoration anniversary of the 1945 hideous massacres of Stif, Guelma and Kherrata in eastern Algeria, in which more than 45,000 peaceful Algerians were savagely killed by French colonial soldiers. The visiting French minister has officially apologized to the Algerian government for all the awesome pain and suffering inflicted on the Algerians during the horrendous massacres. Siam Sadu reports.
France Veterans Minister Jean-Marc Todeschini paid a visit to Algeria to mark for the first time the 70th anniversary for the 1945 Stif massacres in eastern Algeria, in which more than 45,000 Algerians were brutally killed by the French army. The French minister told the press high-level representatives of the French government has a strong recognition of the suffering inflicted on Algerians. The massacres began after a peaceful demonstration on May 8, 1945, the day the Second World War in Europe ended. The demonstration included pro-independence elements whose banners and Algerian flags, banned at the time, were confiscated by the colonial gendarmerie, resulting in exchanges of gunfire. After 5 days of chaos, the French army and police, as well as civilian colonists, embarked on a series of reprisals, killing suspected Algerian troublemakers out of hand and, in some cases, aerial bombing entire villages. The official French report in the wake of the massacres estimated the number of Algerian deaths at 1,200. The Algerian government maintains to this day that more than 45,000 people were killed in the massacres, which for many historians marked the beginning of Algeria's long and bloody independence struggle. The period of unrest, anti-French violence resulted in the deaths of around 100 French Pieds Noirs colonists. Reports at the time claimed many victims were raped and mutilated. The visit of the French minister aims at apologizing towards the inhuman behavior during a conflict whose bitter legacy continues to sour relations between the two countries.
The Inter-Malian Dialogue Mediation Team led by Algeria has urged Saturday all the parties at issue to sign the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement in Mali during the ceremony that will be held in Bamako on the 15th of May, prompting the armed groups of the Azawad movement to fully adhere to the overall peace agreement they declined to initial here in Algiers. Siam Sado again.
The Inter-Malian Dialogue Mediation Team, led by Algeria, has called Saturday all the parties to sign the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement in Mali during the ceremony, which will take place in Bamako on the 15th of May. Foreign Affairs Minister Ramtala Mamra said that the ongoing peace process must continue with a view to consolidating the achievements made so far. To that end, the mediation team invites all the political military movements who signed in Algiers' declaration of 9 June 2014, all the signatory parties of the roadmap of the 24th July 2014 to sign the agreement during this ceremony. Moreover, the mediation team said that the necessary measures will be taken to enable and facilitate to each member from the Azawad armed groups who did not sign up yet wishing to contribute to the achievement of the agreement in their country. Peace talks began in Algiers last July resulted last month in a deal between the Malian government and some armed groups by the main Tuareg rebel alliance known as the Coordination for the Movements of Azawad, who claimed amendments. The mediation held a series of meetings and consultations under the chairmanship of its key mediator, underlining how the Malian people were full of hope and optimism when the inclusive inter-Malian talks were launched as part of Algiers process on the 16th of July 2014, with a view to see the 3-year-long crisis coming to an end. Today, they are eager to see this legitimate aspiration leading for peace, national reconciliation, good governance, and socio-economic development.
Let's shift now to the burning education file. After several weeks of long and tiresome negotiations between the National Education Ministry and unions of the sector, the open-ended strike that paralyzed the educational sector for several weeks was finally put to an end. But strike actions are set to take place again as workers within the sector geared up to stage sit-ins outside the premises of the National Education Ministry here in Algiers in a bid to press for their socio-economic claims. Mustafa Azzouk.
Including substitute teachers, vowed to gear up for more strikes and sittings after the Ministry of Education stated that the process would only concern teachers working full-time. It is known that the concerned ministry only addresses teachers' issues and usually turns a deaf ear to the other parties. In light of these factors and many other professional reasons, the National Council has undertaken a decision to stage a 3-day strike starting from the 27th of the current month. The National Education Ministry has showed willingness to sit at one table with its social partners to discuss the socio-economic claims and address their pending issues that most educational unions have raised their voices about in recent years, the issues that have paralyzed the educational sector for more than a month. We have always called on the concerned ministry to merge substitute teachers within the sector. As a result, a national sit-in is set to take place next week to raise our voice. The sit-in will be held outside the premises of the National Education Ministry. With the final state exams just around the corner, these imminent strikes that are set to be held in the current month could worsen the situation even more as the students remain the sole victims of this never-ending dispute.
Algeria is hoping to revive a flagging economy with a new $262 billion worth investment program over 5 years to develop and diversify the national economy, notably by boosting the vital industrial infrastructures through a more active involvement of the country's private sector. More on the topic with Mohamed Baraswan.
The injection of new funds is a welcome relief for the Algerian economy that has underperformed in recent years. Despite relatively high oil prices in 2014, Algiers' economy grew 2.7% last year. It can expect to post a more respectable 4.3% growth this year and 4.1% in 2016, but the gains are expected to be lower than its regional oil exporting peers, according to the International Monetary Fund IMF estimates. The new investment outlay is lower than the $286 billion earmarked during 2010 to 2015, but vital to offset falling oil and gas export revenues. Thanks to the major infrastructure projects carried out as part of the 5-year 2010-2014 public investment program, construction and public works grew by 8.2% in 2012, up from 5.2% in 2011, providing 9.6% of the country's gross domestic product GDP, according to the African Development Bank. Algeria's new investment program is reportedly looking to engage the private sector more actively. Analysts believe the Algerian government needs to initiate economic reforms that would facilitate the growth of various underperforming industries. Algiers' GDP per capita of $5,347 is relatively lower than other upper-middle-income economies and belies its status as one of the world's largest oil exporters and a key natural gas supplier to Europe.
In other local news, the general manager of Algiers Metro, or subway transport, Muammar Hadbi, has announced that some construction works to extend the metro line in the center of Algiers will be wrapped up by the end of June, adding that another metro line will connect the town of Al-Harraj with Houari Boumediene International Airport on the eastern outskirts of the capital, Algiers. Usama Snoussi.
The metro line from Al-Badr neighborhood to Al-Harraj that extends over a 4 kilometers distance will begin service by the end of June. This line will facilitate transportation in crowded neighborhoods from and to the center of Algiers.
The first line extension from Al-Harraj over 4 kilometers includes 4 stations. This extension will begin service by the end of June, and it will include large population neighborhoods like Basharah, Kuba, and Al-Harraj Center. From Al-Badr neighborhood to Ain Naja, over 3.6 kilometers, we have 3 stops. The civil engineering works duly ended early this month.
Concerning new lines, Mr. Muammar Hadbi, the general manager of Algiers Metro, has announced the beginning of extension works from Al-Harraj to Houari Boumediene International Airport, over a 9 kilometers distance, which is considered as the most important line, as it will help commuters move from and to the airport.
Well, it's a very important project, and we started working on it from Al-Harraj to the airport, over 9 kilometers with 8 stops. And this metro line has a direct correspondence with the new international airport of Algiers.
The Metro of Algiers has attracted more than 51 million commuters since it was inaugurated on the 1st of November 2011 and has registered an increase of 20% between 2012 and 2013.
According to Italian authorities, more than 700 Libyan migrants have passed away after they attempted to reach Italy's coast illegally. The fishing boat sank in the Libyan coast overnight, and searches are still ongoing to find the remaining bodies. 25 bodies have been recovered so far by Italian rescuers. Shagib Lawishi.
As many as 700 people were feared dead after a fishing boat packed with migrants capsized off the Libyan coast overnight in what may be one of the worst disasters of the Mediterranean migrant crisis. 28 people were rescued in the incident, which happened just off Libyan waters, south of the southern Italian island of Lampedusa. If confirmed, the death toll would bring the total number of dead since the beginning of the year to more than 1,500. The new deaths fueled call for a stronger response from Europe to the increasingly deadly migrant crisis playing out in the Mediterranean. International aid groups and Italian authorities have criticized Europe's so-called Triton border protection operation, which recently replaced a more comprehensive Italian search and rescue mission. Italian officials said Navy and Coast Guard vessels, as well as merchant ships in the area and a Maltese patrol boat, were involved in the search and rescue operation, which was being coordinated by the Italian Coast Guard in Rome.
Foreign nationals in South Africa are seeking protection as xenophobic attacks hit at least 9 provinces. In the Verulam area in KwaZulu-Natal province, people have fled their homes and are now living in tents behind a police station. Now, police forces are on alert in South Africa's business hub after violence left 8 dead and displaced up to 7,000 people. Karim Faz-Zakri.
An uneasy calm prevails in South Africa's financial hub, Johannesburg, on the 3rd day since violence against foreigners erupted in the city. People were on alert on Sunday for further incidents after the city saw an outbreak of anti-immigrant attacks in certain neighborhoods. At least 5 people have been killed and up to 7,000 displaced in anti-immigrant violence, which flared up on March 30th in the country's coastal province of KwaZulu-Natal. Foreigners in South Africa queue up in a makeshift camp to leave the country and escape the wave of anti-immigration violence. President Jacob Zuma visited the camp in Durban, where the violence started after cancelling a trip to Indonesia and tried to reassure the crowd.
Those who want to go home, they must know that when we've arranged everything, when we stopped violence, they are still welcomed as they came.
The president was heckled by some, and there were cries of too late and go home. That's what several migrants said about doing themselves, boarding buses provided by neighboring countries to take them home. The violence began after Zulu King Goodwill Zwelithini reportedly said foreigners should go home. He has since said his comments were misrepresented. South Africa is home to some 5 million immigrants who come from across Africa and further afield. Police in Johannesburg used rubber bullets on Friday night to fight off looters after a day of 10 standoffs between locals and foreigners. They also blocked the city ring road to clear the streets of protesters. Dozens of South Africans living in neighboring Mozambique left the country on Friday, fearing reprisal attacks.
So I can't expect from police to stand for me all the day in my door. That means the police cannot protect me for 24 hours of my lifetime. That's why I say our life is in danger. Absolutely, our life is in danger. And we are under attack.
It was 2008, the zone of fear. From since the day, people anyway, when you meet you in the location, when you are alone in something, even when you do a business, when you sell them something, they start to call you, koro, go to your country.
The South African government has asked for diplomatic support from across the continent to defeat what it calls the demon of anti-immigrant violence.
In troubled Yemen, Operation Decisive Storm has continued into its third week as a Saudi-led military coalition has not stopped its aerial bombardments of Houthi rebels' positions. The death toll in the southern city of Aden has risen sharply in the past week, and the conflict is not showing any signs of resolution as the Yemeni government rejected an Iranian-backed peace plan on Saturday. Maher Mzahi reports.
Operation Decisive Storm continues in Yemen and no signs of a resolution are in sight. Iran has proposed a 4-point peace plan which calls for a stop to all foreign airstrikes, for a stop to the embargo which is impeding much-needed health supplies in the region, and for a national dialogue to resolve the crisis. However, Yemeni government official Rajah Badi has rejected the proposition as he believes it is but a political maneuver. According to U.S. military officials, Iran is sending an armada of 7 to 9 ships, some with weapons, towards Yemen in a potential attempt to resupply Houthi rebels. Saudi Arabia and its Sunni Arab coalition partners have been bombing Iranian-allied Houthi rebels for more than 3 weeks, and the death toll has risen sharply in the past 48 hours as Houthis have been closing in on the southern port city of Aden. Sources in the city released a death toll on Saturday, with residents saying the city was the scene of explosions and gunfire between the warring sides. The United Nations said that about 150,000 people had been driven from their homes by airstrikes and ground fighting, and more than 750 people have been killed.
Elsewhere in strife-torn Iraq, Iraqi soldiers have reportedly retaken control of the country's biggest and most important oil refinery, which has been under the control of the ISIS terror group so far a long time. This is a good news for the Iraqi government forces as they are gaining more ground and at the same time witnessing some weakening of the terrorist groups. Shagib Lawishi.
Iraqi soldiers surrounded and took control of the country's biggest oil refinery Saturday, which has been besieged for days by Islamic State terrorists. The refinery at Beji, north of Baghdad, have been held by the Iraqi military for months, despite the terrorist offensive. However, ISIS rebels recently carried out a major attack and took over a small part of the complex. Retaining control remains crucial for the country, as it accounts for a little more than a quarter of the country's entire refining capacity. The victory comes as Iraqi government forces and allied Shiite and Sunni fighters have been locked in intense battles with ISIS militants to retake key cities and territory in northern and western Iraq. A day earlier, Iraqi soldiers, backed by a US-led coalition airstrikes and Shiite and Sunni, gained control of the towns of Al-Malha and Al-Mazarah, located 1.9 miles south of the refinery. Special forces also managed to maintain control of the provincial capital, Ramadi, in Iraq's western province Friday, despite ISIS forces pounding the city with bombings and forcing residents to flee. In separate violence Saturday, police said a bombing on a commercial street killed 3 persons and wounded 10 in central Baghdad.
In the UK election file, British Prime Minister David Cameron visited a Sikh temple in southeast England to take part in Spring Festival celebrations and try, by the same token, to clinch some extra votes ahead of the May 7th general election. Karim Fazakri.
British Prime Minister David Cameron visited a Sikh temple in southeast England to take part in Spring Festival celebrations and try to win some extra votes ahead of the May 7 general election. With a new poll putting the Conservative and Labour parties neck and neck in one of the country's closest elections in decades, party leaders are pounding the campaign trail. In a major speech on immigration, Labour leader Ed Miliband said his party would protect British wages by making it a criminal offence to underpay or exploit migrant workers. He also pledged to hire extra border control staff and impose English language requirements on new immigrants. Miliband's bid to change the perception of Labour as soft of immigration reflects recent polls that say 76% of people living in Britain want to see a reduction in the number of immigrants in the country. The UK Independence Party, or UKIP, led by Nigel Farage, is built on that one key platform. Britain needs to control immigration by leaving the European Union. But for every voter who embraces that message, others say immigrants come to the UK to work, pay taxes, and boost the economy. No party looks likely to win an outright majority. So who eventually ends up in Downing Street will also depend on which parties can find enough common ground to form a coalition.
Moving now to technology-related news, where drones have developed rapidly over the past few years. Their popularity seems to have surprisingly increased, as they can be used in many fields such as agriculture, exploring nuclear hit places, and much more. Let's fly together with Mustafa Azzoug in the following report.
After it was only limited to the US Army as an autonomous device to spy on Taliban strongholds in Afghanistan, the popularity of the drone seemed to have surprisingly boomed in recent months, as it can be used in many fields and not just for taking high-definition videos from up high. In London, for instance, a near-future vision of the life of the urban drone imagined by design agency Superflux as part of an exhibition at the V&A Museum, a team led by John Andron and Abe Jain designed and built a series of drones to explore how these flying machines will soon populate our cities. According to the firm, a drone can glide through suburbs and outskirts. For instance, if it sees a man, it scans his face and quickly looks up his criminal record. Elsewhere, a traffic drone spies on vans and cars, checking their emissions and identifying illegal drivers. The video they create above depicts how these machines will perceive an invisible world of information within our cities. They can scan buildings, vehicles and people, track faces and geolocation, and look up personal data on distant databases somewhere in the cloud.
And finally, in our edition, a word about sport with on focus 3 Algerian First League clubs attempting to qualify for the group stages of the CAF Champions League competition. ES Setif, USM Algiers and MC Al Ulma all contest the first leg of their respective ties today. Maher Mzai has the details about the upcoming football action.
The second round of CAF Champions League qualifying takes place tonight for all 3 Algerian clubs. Defending champions ES Setif are in Morocco to play Raja Casablanca at the Mohammed V Stadium. Setif defeated Real de Banjul in the previous round and must overcome this last obstacle before qualifying to the group stages. The match will prove difficult as North African derbies usually are. 60,000 home fans are expected as all tickets have already been sold out. Algerian champions USM of Algiers host Guinean outfit AS Kaloum at the Boulourine Stadium. Arab Pfister's men must try to break out of the funk as they have won 1 out of 6 points in their last 2 league matches. Zinedine Ferhat returns for this fixture, but the USM of Algiers do not have a striker to call on, as both Rashid Naji and Menucho are injured. The return leg will be played in Mali, as the Confederation of African Football have deemed it unsafe to play matches in Guinea. Like Sétif, MC Al Ulma will contest a North African derby against Tunisian side CS Sfaxien. The match will be played at the Masoud Zougar Stadium in Al Ulma. Sfax have appointed former Gabon coach Paulo Duarte as manager and are veterans in this tournament. Though it would be a veritable exploit if Babia managed to qualify past such a formidable opponent, it would not be the first time Shinihi & Co created an upset in this competition. All 3 matches kick off at 6 p.m. local time.
The end of our English news edition. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.